had Thanksgiving yet. And Thanksgiving probably ought to be the better and bigger holiday. Because we ought to in all things give thanks to God at all times and all ways. Well, Reader's Digest used to have an article entitled, I haven't read the Reader's Digest Solomon is the one who introduced this book. You know, he wrote the majority of the Proverbs. He didn't write them all. And all of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote are not recorded for us in the Bible. Just those that God wanted us to have are recorded for us in the Bible. Think about that. So he says that one of the purposes, or at least the foundation for Proverbs, all these wise sayings, is so that people can know wisdom and instruction. Have knowledge about what wisdom is. Have instruction about wisdom and doing wise things. Being wise. And notice again the couplet. So to know and to discern are synonyms. To know wisdom and instruction. To discern sayings of understanding. So knowing and discerning are synonymous with each other. So we know it's not just academic knowledge. I know what it says. But it's discerning. It's knowing that discerns. The meaning that discerns. The truth of it. The application. Wisdom gives one the ability to learn. Isn't it interesting that again, have you read Proverbs? Fools don't learn things. Naive people don't learn things. You know, you can't teach people who think they already know everything. They don't listen. And is it as interesting to you as it is to me that as he writes through the book of Proverbs, you know, he talks a lot about children who don't listen to their parents. And he calls them foolish. That's God talking, folks. What do we think about that? But I'm going to say this. I'm going to make this observation now, and then I'm going to hopefully prove it in another lesson. There's these applications going on. Notice, is it verse 6? I might get down there in a minute. Verse 6 where he talks about understanding the riddles and sayings of the wise. Figures. A lot of Proverbs is figurative. And so it talks about the young man going to the harlot, being seduced by the harlot, and telling the young man not to do that because that's unwise. Well, and by the way, and to stay faithful to the true woman, the harlot, folks, is the opposite of wisdom in the book of Proverbs. The harlot is not, the harlot is a figure of speech for the opposite of wisdom. Don't be seduced by ignorance. Ignorance is not bliss. Don't be seduced by pride. Don't be seduced by reputation. Be guided by wisdom. And so wisdom is personified, and over and over and over, wisdom says, listen to me. Listen to me. Be faithful to me. Understand me. The wise people know that they still have a lot to learn. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. And a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. A wise man will look for people who are wise so that he can hear of their wisdom. He won't think he's got it all. A wise man will be a learner. Well, it's interesting to me, by the way. You know what a disciple is? A learner. Christians are supposed to be disciples. Therefore, they're supposed to be learners. Therefore, they're supposed to be wise. You see the logic? And wisdom gives people the ability to understand what And when we start judging people based on what they do, we start attributing to them the motives that we think has to be the case because they're doing what they're doing. The motives in their heart and their conscience must be terribly sinful and rebellious because they're doing these things. And different people do different things for different motives. Do you know that the Pharisees' motive for being Pharisees was because they loved the law of the Lord and they wanted to protect it, and so they put a hedge inside it so if you don't go past this fence, you won't go past that other fence. But their attitude, their idea was to protect the law of the Lord. That was their heart. Boy, it starts to make a little bit of sense when we find out that David was right when he said the heart is deceptive above all. Sometimes I'm going to get to that more in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. So, understanding, and here's verse 6. This is the one I was telling you about a while ago to let you know that we got figures and a speech. To understand the proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. Again, I want you to see the parallelism. The first phrase is to understand the proverb and the figure. The second phrase is the words of the wise and their riddles. So the proverb and the figure, you see, understanding the proverb and the figure is understanding what the wise people are talking about when they give you their figures of speech. And riddles is not the best word there, but it's not bad. But wisdom has a moral dimension. Proverbs 1 verse 3. To receive instruction in what? Wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and iniquity. Now, I think righteousness, justice, and iniquity is the second couplet. So the first couplet is to receive instruction in wise behavior. So wise behavior is behaving righteously, justly, and equitably. That's what's wise. So wisdom has that moral quality about it to discern truth from error. Wisdom will help you know the difference between what's true and what's false, error. And it's interesting to me. Sometimes, you don't always have to know what everything means to know what it don't mean. But I've said for ages, folks, we don't need to have classes on denominational doctrines as much as we need to have classes on what the Bible says. But I think I went wrong. I've always said, if we know what the Bible says, then we can know when somebody says something that's not what the Bible says, that it's not what the Bible says. We know that it's error. When somebody says something that the Bible don't say, if we know what the Bible says, then we know it's not right. We know it's not true. We know it's not Bible. But just to know that it's not Bible is not enough. We've got to be willing to be brave enough and strong enough to say, so this is the way the Bible teaches me to live, and so Rainmaker with Burt Lancaster. Some of y'all are chewing out younger than Burt Lancaster. Wow. That was a classic movie, as far as movies go. And the character, Lancaster was a con man of sorts, who was going to bring rain to a drought-plagued area. And he was kind of a con man. And there was this woman who was the daughter of the old ranger there that he was trying to get, and she was a plain woman. She was kind of not a good-looking woman, kind of homely, and nobody in the territory wanted to pursue her, And so the character of Burt Lancaster, he kept telling her, don't lose your dreams, keep dreaming and keep thinking and keep looking for the goal, And he wooed her, and he finally went to bed with her. And the brother found out about it. And the brother went and got his gun, and he was going to shoot Lancaster. And the daddy, the father, spoke to the son. And here's the quote, folks. This is the quote. Noah, you're so full of what's right, you can't see what's good. In other words, him seducing that homely woman and giving her satisfaction and love and what she needed was good. And so therefore, good trumps right. Folks, good, as the world looks at good, never trumps what's right. It's never right to commit sin. It's never right to condone acts of sin. And when we deal with people who are committing acts of sin, sometimes our own family members, we can't condone the sin. We always have to love the sinner, folks, but we can't condone the sin. But if you see me dealing with a family member or a friend or whoever, and you see me dealing with them, and you know that that person has committed sin, and I'm not just talking about an act of sin, but one of our atrocious sins, and dealing with them, and maybe I don't put the hammer down and put the law on them right now. You attribute to me the motive of I don't care. Thought process that I'm not trying to help that person, I don't condone what they did. It's never right to do wrong. That's all we have to do. We have to keep trying to deal with each other wisely. Wisdom never calls error truth or evil good. That's just how it is. Wisdom always wants what's best for the other person. Well, that's what love does, doesn't it? Well, summing it all up, finally gets to wisdom. Well, I don't know how I miss these little things, and I do that every night. I was noticing this morning in some of the Spanish songs, some of the words that I need to go back and change because I got spaced in one that wasn't there. And I'm thinking, here my Spanish brethren out there looking at that, and I messed that up. Well, I didn't mean to mess that up. My motive wasn't to mess it up. My motive was to do it correctly and be helpful. Wisdom has a God dimension. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Again, notice the covenant. The contrast. The wise person fears the Lord and understands. The foolish person despises wisdom and instruction. Therefore, fools don't have the fear of the Lord. Proverbs chapter 2. they want. They can buy and have it. Well, you know what the difference between men and boys are? The size and cost of their toys. Mature people haven't grown up, or grown people haven't really matured, have they? Or grown up. Because they still want them toys. They still seek that silver and gold. They still seek that material. But if you search for wisdom, like you search for money, then you'll discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. If you value that as it ought to be valued, then you'll get real treasure. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from His mouth comes knowledge and understanding. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverted mouth, I hate. Now, who hates that? Who hates pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverted mouth? The Lord. Wisdom hates it. Now, the Lord does hate it. Don't misunderstand me. But remember to keep it in the context of the lesson. Who's talking here? Wisdom hates that. So if you're a wise person, what do? You hate that. And wisdom comes from the Lord, who hates that. Proverbs 16, verse 6. By loving kindness and truth, iniquity is atoned for. And by the fear of the Lord, one keeps away from evil. So again, wisdom and foolishness. Character is the moral strength to do the right thing, even when it costs more than you want to pay. Do the right thing, even when it hurts you to do the right thing. And our old-time brethren used to talk about giving, by the way, and they would always say that the real soul wasn't baptized. So get down the water and baptize it, Some men say give till it hurts. And then one old wise brother said give till it quits hurting. But it don't hurt you to give. In the true sense of the word, then you have arrived in that area. Character is moral strength to do the right thing even when it costs more than you want to pay. Wisdom always does what wisdom does. Faith always does what faith does. Love always does what love does. And to the degree and the act that we perform an action of not loving, don't ever call that love. That's not love. When we perform an act of faithlessness, don't ever call that faith. That's not faith. When we perform an act of immorality, don't ever call that moral. It's not moral. So Wooden said, your reputation is who people think you are. Your character is who you really are. Folks, God is always going to be God, and He can't be anybody else. You know what that means? God can only do what God can do. That kind of sounds limiting, doesn't it? God can only do what God can do. God can't lie. God can only do what God can do. How about you? How about the Christian? How about sons and daughters of God? How about our pursuit? A good name somebody knowing your good name is better than silver or gold. There's the point. Wisdom shows character. Wisdom shows name. How do we think about wisdom? We think about Plato and Socrates and all those, Jesus lived during the time of some of those wise people. Jesus said those people weren't very wise in a lot of areas. But Jesus always was. Jesus is the wisdom of God, and God calls us to live the life of faith through Jesus Christ in relationship to God. Wisdom comes from God, and wisdom does the right thing. So when people see us always doing the right thing, they see our character. Our name means something. I look back at my life and think, well, my name has been kind of atrocious at times. When I came back to visit where I went to work before I went to preaching, those guys said, "You're a preacher?" What did that say about my name before? When I went back to my high school, and even the church that I was baptized in as a teenager, and some of those people said, "You're a preacher?" So, guess what we have to do? Wise people try to keep on learning, try to keep on growing, try to keep on knowing, so that they can be better. Not just good, but better. You've never come to God through Jesus Christ, who called you to himself, that you may be counted holy, righteous, that you might be motivated to pursue being better. And we'd encourage you to do that this morning. But remember, God's sons and God's daughters are to walk like God. And if you didn't come to God through Jesus this morning for any reason, we invite you